Welcome to the Nerd Party.
I like what I call this kind of snowballing effect of storylines, and cross-cutting parallel action is a wonderful tool for a filmmaker.
Hello everybody and welcome to House of Nolan. Today we are going to be talking about The Dark Knight Rises, and this is a special episode because this is the ending of the Dark Knight trilogy and the ending of the only trilogy or complete arc or multi-movie arc that Nolan has ever done so far. There's nobody better to talk about this movie with than Brandon Shea Mutala. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Insert Bane voice joke here.
And the lovable and lovely John Mills.
We come here to give this podcast to you, the people.
I was really hoping one of you would make a what a lovely, lovely voice
yes,
reference.
I was leaving it to John because I know he can do a better Bane than I can.
I'm more about the speech in front of Blackgate Prison. That's a real. We'll get to it, but that's sort of a real highlight for me in this movie.
Yeah, this strap in, folks, because with a TDKR podcast, you know you're going to be getting the Bane voice at least 4 or 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie, how do we talk about it? Where do we start? You know, like this is such an epic trilogy, and I have no idea where to begin with this. But I guess we'll start with our custom of asking each other where we first encountered this movie. So Brandon, where did you first encounter this movie? Tell me the story. Paint a word picture for me.
So I was super stoked to see this in theaters. I don't think I saw it on opening weekend, but I know that I saw it in theaters. I was very excited because of how much I love The Dark Knight. And if you guys remember in the Dark Knight episode when we talked about it, I said that was the first movie that I had ever been to twice opening weekend. I was so excited about that movie. I fell in love with it. And I remember seeing the trailers for this. I was getting hyped. I was getting very excited. I was so looking forward to this. And I went to the movie theater, and it was the biggest trash pile I have ever seen in my life. I hated every second sitting there watching this movie in theaters for the first time. Now, I've had 3 experiences in my life where I've seen a movie, hated it, never wanted to revisit it, and then I've needed to revisit it for a podcast and really enjoyed it the next time around. So the first time was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I hated that in theaters. I loved it when I saw it again. Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie. I hated it the first time I saw it. I loved it the second time. And this one, I hated it the first time I saw it, and I really enjoyed it this time around.
John, what about you?
Well, I was extremely excited about this. I was skeptical about Tom Hardy as an imposing physical figure because I knew what his real world height was, and I was kind of like, how are they going to make that work? And you have visions of Bane in your head of how big he's going to be because, of course, we've talked about this previously. I have a fair amount of Batman knowledge and stuff like that, but I'm excited because Bane is going to come back. And what's really interesting is having Catwoman and Bane in this continues Nolan's trend of redeeming characters that appeared in lesser Batman movies, like Two-Face, where it's like, okay, well, I'm like, oh, okay, I'd love to see what Nolan does with these characters. And so I was super stoked. I went out and I saw Mission Impossible 4 strictly to see the prologue in IMAX because I said, oh my gosh, he shot it in IMAX again. I got to go see this. Took my cousin. We went to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. We could have walked out of the theater after that prologue. I was perfectly
I think a lot
happy.
of people did.
Yeah, I didn't. Ghost Protocol was fine. But I can tell you that I remember, and I'm not doing this to like put a little feather in my cap or anything like that, because I know I was not the only person in the world. But number one, I didn't have a problem with Bane's voice in that original mix, whatever. And I remember looking, and as soon as I heard, yes, the fire rises, I turned and I looked at my cousin. I said, he's League of Shadows. He's League of Shadows. And my cousin was like, no, he's not. I was like, I swear to God, that's where we're going with this. And so fairly hyped, playing the speculation game. And then I saw it opening weekend with my wife, and we saw it in IMAX, and I loved it. I loved it the first time I saw it. And in subsequent viewings, when I saw it, in the regular 35 millimeter and stuff like that, it was not as impactful as seeing it in that IMAX the first time. But I saw it several times in the theaters, and I've always been sort of a defender of The Dark Knight Rises because a lot of people like to poop on it. But what about you, Tristan? What was your first experience?
Yeah, you and I have been friends for a long time.
Yes.
And we're both Batman fans. We talk about Batman a lot. We text about Batman a lot. And you, very much have been a defender of The Dark Knight Rises. You would, dare I say, you are a Dark Knight Rises apologist, if you will.
Yes.
And coming up to this week of recording, I was kind of like, man, I wonder how this is going to go. I have some criticisms. I wonder if John's even going to let me speak.
Oh, I'm not that. Oh, come on. I'm not that bad.
I know. You are not. You are not that bad. There are certain people we know who are.
Yes.
You are not that bad.
Yes, indeed.
So with me, I didn't get to see the prologue. I missed my chance for one reason or another. Like, obviously, like we've all said, like I was excited. My wife was excited. We're Batman fans, and I missed the prologue, but I did read about how no one could understand a single word that he said. And that interested me because I wish there could have been, like on the DVD, that like you could have an alternate mix, like button or something like that, just to see what everybody was complaining about. But this, the first time I saw it was a midnight showing, opening night. I didn't get to see it in IMAX on opening night because what happened is that I was a best man in a wedding, and I was throwing the bachelor party that day. And to top off the entire night of, like festivities and fun things that and dinner and drinks and everything like that I planned for the groom, he was also a Batman fan. So the last thing of the night was to see The Dark Knight Rises. And we saw it in a normal theater. It was just 35 millimeter. And I chose my seats just right. I was like, I don't want anything to get in the way. I want great experiences. I want to be far back as possible. I wanted the primo seats, and I got the primo seats. And then at the last minute, right before they started rolling, this guy, this attendant comes over and then just plops 2 wooden dining chairs in front of me, and then 2 people sit down. And so their heads are blocking the lower third of the movie the entire time.
2 wooden dining chairs. I'm curious, how does this work? Yeah,
because like I was like, what it was like I was at the bottom of the elevated seating.
Oh, okay.
I was in the first row of the elevated seating,
Gotcha.
and so in front of me was just a walkway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I had no obstructed view. Like there was no one who was supposed to be sitting in front of me, and then boom. Like they were just like, oh, we accidentally oversold 2 tickets, and these jerk-offs were sitting in front of me, and I was so pissed. And like I wanted to go and complain, but I didn't want to miss anything, and I didn't want to be that guy that's the bachelor party.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. But when I saw the movie, I was surrounded by Batman fans, and I was just like, when the movie was over, I was just like, oh. Like I just had this that wasn't very good. Like it was just it was this sinking feeling. I didn't hate it. Like I didn't call it, like, what, Brandon, what'd you call it?
Pile of trash.
Like, pile of trash. I didn't think it was a pile of trash. Like I didn't hate it. Didn't think it was a pile of trash. I didn't think it was like, oh, god awful. How offensive was that? Like such poor quality. I kind of felt like The Godfather Part 3. Like that was immediately what popped into my head. And I know that both of you are objecting for different reasons.
For different reasons, because I'm like, I thought you just said this isn't a pile of garbage. Like, what the hell?
Going that way, man?
You
Let me finish. So with Godfather Part 3, like I actually like Godfather Part 3. I'm a defender of Godfather Part 3. But you have the Godfather, the first one, which is an amazing movie, just like Batman Begins. You have Godfather Part 2, which is arguably better than the first one, just like The Dark Knight. And then you have The Dark Knight Rises, which is a huge drop. But I've learned to love it. I have. It has taken me it has taken way more tries than Brandon to love it, because each time I watch it, I like it more and more. And so I think it's gone from like a 2.5. Like when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, there's so much wrong with this. And there is a lot wrong with this movie. Things that just straight up don't make sense in terms of plot. But once you kind of put those aside, once that initial disappointment is gone, you start to look at the broader themes, the deeper themes, the characterizations, and you look at the script over the plot, and you're like, okay, right, I can appreciate this for the thematic elements and just because Batman's awesome on screen. And so as I've said, I've learned to love this film.
Cool. And the thing is, I want to address that. No, seriously, I want to address that. This is a film which, if you go to my Letterboxd review, I straight up say the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There are parts of this where, and I'm notorious for this. I drive some people up the wall when I say this, where I'm like, the first third kind of got to iron things out. Got into a knockdown, drag out fight with a friend when I said the similar sort of thing about Rogue One, where I'm like, I don't know, there's some leaps here that don't really work for me, champ. But like, there are definite sequencing problems in the establishment of the first part of the film. And there are a couple of things where even this time, every time I watch this, as much as I enjoy it, I see a certain scene and I say, hey, this belonged earlier and this should have gone later. And this, so there seem to be some sort of editing mistakes that stem from what I think the core problem overall, why this doesn't achieve the same heights as The Dark Knight, is that the script is too ambitious. It has too much going on. It's as if they mistook the opportunity for a third one to be their challenge to see exactly how complicated we could make this. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the fundamental thing that probably rubbed everybody wrong from the start on a subconscious level, because the character of Talia is interesting, but unnecessary in a lot of ways. I could have sat down and said, we could combine Catwoman with this character in a couple of ways, streamline this sort of thing going on, bring the intrigue over this way. That being said, once it hits a certain point, everything evens out for the most part, and it becomes just a nice, smooth ride. But I definitely think that they, at the script level, bit off more than they could chew.
Well, the original script was 400 pages.
Yeah.
And you can tell.
Yep.
Like, you can tell, like, this was supposed to be a gigantic epic, like, in just a grand opus. And then I think Nolan took that 400-page script and was just like, well, I can't film all of this, so let's just chop this. And he just started removing stuff, and you can kind of tell. Now, before we go into kind of what I don't want to focus too heavily right off the bat on what we think doesn't work. I want to focus on what we think does work, because this is a hotly contested film among Batman fans. This is a hotly contested film among superhero fans. But this film is on a lot of important and famous top 100 lists or top movies of 2010, the 2010s list, like some even best movies of all time lists. Like, at least this movie is beloved by a lot of people and a lot of influential critics. And so even though there's some arguing amongst fans, it's found its audience. It's obviously found its financial audience. This made over $1 billion, just like The Dark Knight. So John, I want to start with you. What do you love about this film? What's the first thing that pops into your head?
Bane.
When I say, hey, love.
Bane. I absolutely love Bane from start to finish. I was in love with the character from the first showing forward. I thought that Hardy's vocal choice was the right type of whimsical, because it would have been so easy to make Bane have a deep Darth Vader. But instead, he has a very human voice, if that makes any sense. I thoroughly enjoy Alfred's arc specifically because it really hurts. And Alfred, I think, takes a very important character turn in this to be the person who willingly says to Bruce, you're doing the wrong thing. And I understand what this is going to cost me to say this to you. And I have to tell you. And so Alfred, I think, takes a very important turn. I wish he were in the movie more, but again, that's turning into, what doesn't work sort of thing. I thought Anne Hathaway was a lot of fun as Catwoman. I enjoyed her characterization of the character. I think the action sequences are an absolute blast. I love the music cue and everything about that motorcycle chase coming out of the stock market. I remember seeing that for the first time in the theater and just getting giddy because it was just like, wow, that was a truly comic book sequence come to life. And I enjoyed, in all honesty, just the fact that they had a very relevant cultural discussion that has only become more relevant through the years, with that discussion of how are you going to balance justice and structure and rights and all of those sorts of things. The whole police versus people sort of dialogue that is ongoing, I think, has a very good place, and I think is why this film remains relevant so many years later.
Brandon, what changed your mind when you watched it a second time, when you watched it for this podcast?
I will honestly, I pointed it out in our private message group there. I think that something changed with the audio dialogue of Bane. That was the big frustration. That's fine that they changed it afterwards. The first time I saw this in theaters, I couldn't understand a word Bane said the whole movie. So I don't know if that was the movie theater I was in or what, but I could not understand him in the movie theater at all, and I found that extremely frustrating. So the first thing is, as soon as I started watching this on Saturday morning, I'm like, I can understand him, to the point where I also realized his audio track is much louder than everyone else's as well. They've done something to his audio here. So I had thought that they did this for the home video release. You guys are telling me that they did this after this special IMAX preview, which I hadn't seen that in IMAX. So right there, being able to understand the main antagonist of the film definitely increased my enjoyment of this film quite significantly, I'll say. And that's something that suffers from some later Nolan films as well that I've seen in the movie theater. But I don't know. That was the primary. Honestly, I would say that would be the primary thing. Sitting down and watching it, I love a lot of the things that John said as well. Anne Hathaway's performance as Catwoman is really, really stellar in this. I'm a big fan of Batman Returns. I personally think that Batman Returns is better than Batman. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason is I think that Danny DeVito is fantastic as the Penguin, and I think Michelle Pfeiffer is fantastic as Catwoman. But I like the different approach that they've taken to the Catwoman character. And as a person who doesn't really know the comics that well and really comes to Batman through the movies, my only previous experience to Bane was Batman and Robin. And I'm like, boy, this is not the same character, is this? This is quite a little bit different here. So going into the movie originally, I'm like, the third guy from Batman and Robin, that's the main villain in this one. I love Bane. I think it was really cool, and I agree. The vocal choice of Tom Hardy's is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, with the home release of Bane's voice, I remember it being booming in the theater. Yeah. I remember his voice practically sounded like a megaphone every single time, to the point where I felt like it had to have been if they wrote it into the story, I would have believed it, where they're just like, oh yeah, this mask anesthetizes me so I'm not in constant pain, and it also booms my voice right into your ear canals.
Yep.
Which there are times I like it, there are times I really like it, and there are times when it's a little distracting, but overall I like it because right before the showdown, the first fight where they break the bat, right when the gate slams down and he's like, no need to stand on ceremony, Mr. Wayne. Even though he's super far away, it sounds like he's right next to him, just about to pounce. And so I kind of liked it from that perspective. Overall, what I like of the film, I kind of echo, John, what you were saying. Bane's performance is fantastic in the same way that, Heath Ledger's performance as Joker in The Dark Knight was fantastic. I mean, it's just he really steals the scenes that he's in, and you can tell that he really threw himself into the part. And I mean, the guy gained 30 pounds of muscle and studied multiple fighting techniques, and I know that a lot of actors do that, but it's just one sign that he really threw himself into it. And John, I loved how you described it, where it's just the right amount of whimsy. Bane, the character, when he said, he's like, what a lovely, lovely voice, is funny. It's endearing, and also like that was an improv line from Hardy that he did on the day. Like even just like little things, like when they're on the football field and after the explosion goes off, he's talking to Pavel and he's like, who are you? And he says who I am. And he's like, and what is this? And he just kind of waves without looking. It's those kind of little moments where I half expected when they were sitting in the courts and he was just kind of sitting there and like playing with like a piece of leather or something. I half expected that to be knitting needles, you know, because of how like just how humorous Bane is on a very low key way, like not an over the top way. And I also, you know, love the Alfred arc, but wish he was in there more. I think Christian Bale doesn't get enough credit for what he does in The Dark Knight Rises. I feel like we don't talk about him a lot as Batman fans and as fans of the film about what he brings to the table and how he has kind of an understated pain to Bruce Wayne. I know that he gets a lot of flack for when he asks where the Trigger Man is. I know he gets a lot of flack for that moment, and yes, that was over the top, but he was Bruce Wayne way more than he was Batman in this film, and I think he gives a lot of quiet desperation that allows you to kind of empathize and relate a little bit more than any other Bruce Waynes. And I think that's what I really enjoy about it. It's just like the nature of rising, the nature of overcoming, the nature of moving on. I think that really speaks to me in that moment. And so now I kind of want to creep into what we think doesn't work. And Brandon, I want to come back to you. You know, you thought it was a hot garbage, you know, when you first saw it because you couldn't understand the antagonist. Now that you do, you said that it was enjoyable, but you're not saying, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. Now, obviously, I'm not saying you have to because there's a great valley in between great and horrible. But what doesn't work for you? What doesn't push this over the top of The Dark Knight?
For me, I think part of the reason that it doesn't bring it right to the top is what John was saying earlier, in that they're trying to make the plot too complex. And I think that this is Christopher Nolan doing his Christopher Nolan thing. The thing that I've been saying is that he's trying to focus so much on making stories that are complex and needlessly complex. Like watching this movie and coming into this, I had forgotten the twist about Qui-Gon's daughter. What's his name?
Ra's al Ghul.
Ra's al Ghul's daughter.
Ra's al Ghul.
I'm bad with names. Okay, I forgot about the twist about her being the daughter, and when it happened, I'm just like, there's like 15 minutes left in the movie, and I don't care that she's his daughter. You know, like they had been setting up this misdirect the whole time of Bane being the child, and the fact that Bane saved her. Like, I don't know, I just didn't care by the time that this happened. I'm just like, this is just an extra layer of complexity for needless sake. As a viewer coming into this, not knowing the film, not knowing about all that much about the comics and Ra's al Ghul, so I don't know if this is in the comics or not. But then also, I was extremely frustrated watching it this time in the fact that Catwoman comes in and saves the day. Like, had Catwoman not come in, I think Batman would have died. I think Bane would have killed Batman. Yep. And for me, with Batman being the hero of these films, the fact that Bane is a superior force to him, the fact that this great detective couldn't outsmart him at the end to win and needed somebody else to come in and blow him away, left me a little bit deflated at the end of this movie. So, like, those are a couple of the real major things that stuck out to me. And then, because John said he loved it or whatever, was seeing Crane again in this movie. I'm just like, I don't know. We didn't need to see Crane again in this film either, but we didn't need him in the last one either. So.
I think I was the one who said it. Like, I really liked seeing Crane in this, and I thought it would have been more impactful to see him in this if we didn't see him in The Dark Knight. That was the point I was making, because I don't know, I thought he brought something really fun to it. It was like he's like sold to the man in the cold sweat. You know, it just. It brought a little levity to the moment. I just love the idea that a court built on junk, it was the highest court in the land. It was built on the old system that was, you know, like I just kind of like the symbolism of that.
I wonder if that was originally intended to be the Joker, because that sounds like a Joker line to me more than a Scarecrow line.
I don't think so.
No. By the time they would have started work on this, I think unless they started writing this while they were in post on The Dark Knight, which I don't think they would have. Like, Heath Ledger died before Dark Knight even came out. So I don't think that that would have ever been envisioned for the Joker. I think it's a worthwhile argument if Heath Ledger had not died. I think the very valid question is, would they have felt pressure to have the Joker in this movie? And in a sense, I think this movie exists in a really weird decision state because of the fact that there's a question about that. And there would have been tremendous pressure to bring the Joker back. He even has the line at the end of The Dark Knight, I have a feeling you and I are destined to do this for a long time. And so if Heath Ledger had been alive and they make this movie without the Joker in it anywhere, I think there would have been a slight rebellion among people saying, what the hell? You can't have a Batman movie without him in it now. And then if you were to work him in so that he just has that one courtroom scene, people would have said, oh, that's cheap. The Joker would have been maneuvering against Bane and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. So in a very large sense, there were people who complained that they didn't even reference the Joker in The Dark Knight Rises. And I have always been of the opinion, you can't. You know he's there if you're an audience member, but once you start acknowledging him, it's sort of the thing that Abrams talked about with The Force Awakens. Once you bring Luke into the story, it's his story. You cannot focus on anybody else. He's back. And so if they bring the Joker back, it's the Joker's movie again. And so you wind up detracting from everything else. Now, you could say, well, maybe that would have been better if it had been Joker and Bane and stuff like that. Because I still think that while the Talia thing structurally works, it's unnecessary and it's also incredibly telegraphed in the sense that news of Marion Cotillard's character didn't break until well into production. And everybody said, oh, she's got to be playing Ra's al Ghul's kid or something like that. I remember it took nobody by surprise, I think, was one of the problems for those who were fans. Because as soon as she walks on screen, I'm like, all right, just set your stopwatch. She's going to reveal it at some point.
And even like I think some set photos leaked where she was in an outfit that screamed Talia. Yeah. And like that also didn't really make sense to me that she like changed her outfit in the middle of this of this final battle to look more like Talia than she did before. That was a little strange. I mean, I never really focused on it that much. Like I never really argued it. I didn't. Now that Brandon, that you bring it up, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I guess it's not necessary, but it never really bothered me. Like there were things that bothered me more. I mean, I don't want to talk about what could be arguably the worst death scene ever. There's a few big things that don't work. I think the absolute biggest thing where you're just like, no person in their right mind would ever decide to do this or follow through with it is to send every single police officer in Gotham City into the sewers. That is a nonsense decision and completely takes me out of the movie. If you have to do that to make your movie work, there's a fundamental flaw. And John, you're ready to pounce, and I can't wait to hear your response to this.
No, I'm not pouncing. I'm not pouncing.
You were making the gesture like...
Well, I'm making the gesture in that what all of us do with the first two films in this series is we ignore some of the comic logic leaps, some of the comic booky stuff because it's so realistic and everything like that. I don't think that the police commissioner would have the authority. Even the police, like the city council would have been like, no, what are you talking about? Right. And of course you could also say, well, Blake isn't in there and neither is the deputy commissioner. So not every police officer is down there. So two of them made it out. But, it's one of those things where I think what it is it's a victim of bad phrasing in a sense. I don't take it as they send every single living, breathing police officer under there. They send in everybody who is not currently on duty. They leave because Gotham is a city without crime, quote unquote, at this point. It's send in everybody who isn't working the beat at that moment. And so everybody gets sent in who's not working the beat at that moment or in the offices or obviously in the big administrative building down at City Hall. They didn't clean those offices out, that sort of thing. So you have something where you're sending in everybody you can, but the phrasing of it is Gordon, of course, obviously upset, saying, send every cop in there. It's not a literal... I'm just saying it's not a literal statement. And of course, I'm getting that look where it's like, well, he says everybody.
I
So
wish this was a
okay.
video podcast.
Well,
Right.
here's the thing, though. Like he says it, and they show it, John.
no, they show a lot of people going under there. Yes.
A lot of people. It was a throng. It was multiple throngs.
Yes.
It was a crazy amount of cops.
Yes.
That does not make sense. And then as soon as even the last cops, the last cops who were like walking in, they were like meandering in because it was so many people who were rushing in first. And as soon as that last person who was just waddling through the opening, that's when the bomb went off.
But again, we're talking about the comic book logic things that we forgive in the previous two. Because the thing is, if you want to be like, oh, well, let's get really, do you honestly think there wouldn't be like black ops teams swarming Gotham, assassinating people left and right and taking them off to like CIA black sites just to try to figure out who the trigger man was and stuff like that? I mean, like if Lucius Fox can figure out what type of signal they're using and how they can block it, I promise you that even if the Pentagon didn't have it at the time, they would go to DARPA and they'd be like, hey guys, you got about 24 hours. We got you. And they would have some sort of signal blocker. So like, that's what I'm saying, right?
No, I understand. I get what you're saying, that there has to be there's a comic book suspension of disbelief. And I completely agree that you need that. And I think as an audience, let me rephrase that. The filmmakers rely on the audience to have that suspension of disbelief, but that suspension of disbelief was so broken by that action, just like the suspension bridges in Gotham that should have collapsed completely if something like that, if one part of it blew up. That's what I'm saying. It's just like there's a point where you can't use the suspension of disbelief argument anymore, and I think Dark Knight Rises reaches that with that amount of cops that go down.
See, the part in this movie that was the suspension of disbelief for me was his broken back and how they're just like, here, we're just going to slap that in. You hang here for a couple months. You'll be fine. I'm like, oh, no.
Well, it's like he had a hernia. It's not, his back wasn't actually broken. It was a hernia.
Except for the spine that was protruding out, as he says.
Well,
he does say that there's a vertebra protruding out.
Yeah.
And also, Bane is the man who broke the bat, not gave the bat a hernia.
I'm just saying, maybe it's just that Bruce was so soft that he just couldn't take a little pain for a change, Now,
one thing that I will defend, to the death, that some people call a plot hole, who I don't think understand what a plot hole actually is how does Bruce Wayne get back to Gotham City? The answer is he's Batman. We don't need to see that journey. We don't need to see him leave the pit and then find his way into Gotham City. He just does.
Nobody asks how he called Alfred to a remote airstrip after blowing up the League of Shadows in China. He didn't even have a cell phone. So how did he get in touch with Alfred? That sort of thing.
I hate that. I've gotten into multiple arguments with people. One super heated, online, where I just had to just straight up ignore him, and he was still going, saying I was being rude for saying that people don't understand what a plot hole is. And I was just it's at what point do you keep widening the definition of a plot hole to include this? A plot hole is something where they where they set up a storyline and then don't follow through with it, or there's some sort of break in the logic. There is no break in this logic. We just don't see that section. He leaves the pit, and then he finds his way back into Gotham City.
But he has no money. Batman. I mean, I had that question watching it too. He's got no money.
Having the question is fine. You're like, oh, how did he get back there? Well, the answer is he's Batman. Not they didn't set this up to where it was. I could go on and on. It's
it didn't take me out of the movie to the point where I'm like, I hate this thing. The thing that pissed me off at the very end of the movie that I'm just like, what are you doing? Is you're like, hi, my name's Blake, Robin Blake. And I'm like, what? I mean, if you're going for as true as you can, why is it Robin Blake and not Dick Grayson? But
yeah, that was unnecessary.
Because what are you trying to set up, right? You're trying to set up that Batman can be anybody, but then you're making this direct callback to an established character, but you're not honoring the established character.
That was weird to me. I feel like I really liked the whole Blake thing where like he, gets the coordinates, goes to the Bat Cave, rises. I love everything about that. The Robin thing, completely unnecessary.
Yeah, it is, but that's sort of a shrug. And the thing is, what I want to do is I want to go back to what you were talking about with the plot hole and say that's one of those instances where what happens symbolically and beat-wise and musically and everything like that, so many things happen that make me gloss over something where in a lesser movie I'm going to hack on it. And I think that might get under some people's skin as well, is that I don't think I'm unique in this. If certain things are working well enough, there are other things where you might hear me rag on something in, again, what I would call a lesser movie, but let slide here. And it's because the things that work here work so well, I'm willing to forgive a little bit more. And going
that's
back
fair.
to that,
I think a lot of people do that.
But going back specifically to that, I agree with Tristan. It's not a plot hole at all. It's just, I don't care. I don't want to see, him going into the American Express Traveler's Check office and using an assumed name to get, 50 cents. And then he leverages the Greek stock market to, et cetera, or whatever. But like that, when he comes out of that prison, it's such an important moment on so many different levels, not just plot-wise, but also the whole symbolically thing. And this movie is filled with these little bits of stage business that I love, that I think really help sell it to me. Bane's lovely voice comment. The fact that he also says thank you when he takes his helmet back, leaving the stock exchange. I remember laughing out loud the first time I saw it because it's so weird. And it's like, okay, what's happening? But also, when Bruce Wayne gets out of the pit, the first thing he does is he picks up the ropes and he throws them down. He frees everybody.
Right.
But they don't linger on it. It's there, but they don't, like, other movies would have shown him pulling people out. Maybe everybody helped him get back to the States because they had loved ones. But all that's important is that you see the difference right there between Bane and Talia and Bruce Wayne and even Ra's al Ghul, is Batman has retained that thing all the way back from Batman Begins. It's his compassion. These guys are in a prison, remember, but he's been down there with them. He's gained empathy for these guys. They don't deserve this fate. And so he gives them the rope to get back out, to free themselves, to rescue the souls, as it were. But the thing that I think really just will always ding it for me, if they had stayed focused on Bane and had Catwoman as that sort of character that acted in a Harvey Dent sort of way, where you have this tug between Catwoman being pulled toward Bane's world and Batman showing her redemption. And so you have this sort of re-prosecution of the person in the middle who has the choice to make. And given that Catwoman's whole arc bends toward that redemptive arc, she responds to Bruce Wayne's compassion. That's the difference that he makes in her life. That sort of thing makes for a stronger film, but a simpler film, a more straightforward film. And that's, again, that's where their missteps are.
That's a solid point. I think we're all kind of, like we want to talk about what we love about the film, but I think in order to, truly, podcast about a film and analyze it, you need to critique it. And I think there's a lot of things to critique in this. And I think one thing that we're really honing in on is simplicity, like cut to the chase. It's just like, we're not saying dumb it down. We're saying simplify in order to streamline. And one thing that really, really didn't work for me, even though I absolutely love the stock exchange chase. I think it's fantastic. It is amazing. It's beautiful in IMAX. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful reintroduction of Batman. It's Bane being awesome, and it gives a little bit more of the backstory between the class wars and everything like that. And I really like it, but the purpose behind it falls flat when you just think for 5 seconds about the stock exchange being all the transactions would have been null and void because of a terrorist attack.
Right. They would have stopped trading immediately. They would, the stock exchange is under attack. They were like, okay, trading stopped. Nothing, no trade is happening out of that stock exchange, period. They would have transferred all of the business over to, I know we're in Gotham in this instance, but they would have transferred it all over to Metropolis at that point and said, okay, all exchanges are going through Metropolis now.
Exactly. And so you're 100% right. And so just when you think about, and I'm not trying to get in my own head, but when you kind of follow that logic and you see how everything was building to that, like Catwoman's introduction with getting the prince, and then Catwoman's altercation with handing off the prince, and then Bane using the prince to, do the stock exchange thing, and then bankrupting Wayne so that Daggett can do a hostile takeover, but he can't do a hostile takeover because he implements Talia on the board, and Talia on the board is able to do what he needs to do what she needs to do. And then Bane is able to come in because of Talia, but we don't know it, even though Daggett could have done it. But I think Daggett was dead by that time. And then he can take certain board members and take them down. It's just all of that is so complex, is that when you have something this complex, don't make the linchpin as flimsy as as floss.
Yes.
I think that's my main thing. Like I feel like there's John, you often smartly say when somebody says, well, what would you have done? You say, well, it's not my job. I'm not the filmmaker. I'm just the audience member. There's a million different ways that you could have had Bane just go into the board and take somebody down. Like like Talia could have already been on the board. Mm-hmm. And Daggett could have been an outside force just trying to bankrupt Wayne Enterprises so that Daggett Industries goes up, and he doesn't even have to be on the board. There's just so many different ways to simplify that whole thing and still have that great chase that, funny enough, started in New York and ended in Los Angeles.
Right, which is weird in and of itself. But the thing is, just to tie on to that point that you have with with the complexity, with the board, with the this, with the that, is again, it gets back to, it forces me, as much as I enjoy the character of Daggett, and they don't, like, there's almost this reverse-ish problem where they have lines of dialogue where, while they're in heated conversation, he says, you've had my crews out there working 24/7 and stuff like that. And it's a throwaway line. And I guess that's real world, but I think that honestly makes it a little, like, I'll admit, like, it was one or two showings before I was like, oh, that has to do with I gotcha. Right. Like, it's so disconnected and it takes place so far apart that it's not that the audience is too dense or not paying enough attention. It's that you're not putting the spotlight in the right spots. And so as a result, you get, again, to your point, this fantastic action sequence that's terrific and rousing, and you feel great. But then when you do slow down, when the adrenaline wears off, and you think, all right then, and it's just sort of,
but you want to forgive it because it's such an amazing scene.
And it's the same reason. Again, I'll go all the way back to the beginning where I talk about certain things happen out of sequence. I wish they make this weird decision in the beginning to have the charity function happen, and then we clearly see that dawn rises, Bruce has been up all night, and then we have the following night. And it creates the issue with Gordon carrying the speech around in his pocket 24/7. Now, I'm willing to believe that Gordon's just a forgetful guy and that speech is in his pocket and everything. But if you simply get rid of the transition of Alfred going down and establishing that it's a brand new day, and you tighten it a little bit, and you just have Alfred showing up after the heist has happened, and he's like, oh, you're back down here. Well, that's weird. What's going on? And he's talking about Selena Kyle and everything like that, and you tighten a couple other things up so that it can read visually as if this is just 3:00 in the morning, the following morning, instead of 8:00 at night the following night. Everything's a little bit tighter. Everything's a little bit smoother. And you don't have this moment to pause and do what I'm doing right now, where you're saying, why does Gordon have that speech in his pocket still?
I actually, that never really bothered me. And I have defended that a little bit because I found plane tickets in my coats from 5 years prior. And so like, and he doesn't put it in his jacket pocket. Mm-hmm. He doesn't put it in his blazer pocket. He puts it in his winter coat pocket.
True.
And so I give some forgiveness there. I totally see what you're saying, and I think what you're saying is accurate. I think it would be tighter if they did the things that you're talking about. But I forgive that because I have very much found, like lots of things in my coat, from years later.
And the thing is, people are going to think that when we get to the ratings, people are going to anticipate a much lower rating than I'm about to give it. But again, whole is greater than some of its parts. But it's one of those things where, and this happens with movies every so often, where it winds up being death by 1,000 cuts. Where if the excellent parts of this movie were not as excellent as they are, these 1,000 cuts would have sunk this movie for me. Would have absolutely taken it down and set it on fire.
Mm-hmm. Now, I got a question that I need help on from you guys here, because the fundamental linchpin of these two final movies is something that I really have trouble comprehending and understanding. So bear with me as I discuss this out, because again, as I've said, this is like the second and third time that I've seen the second and third Batman movies here. So Harvey Dent is this righteous guy who's trying to become the commissioner, and he's trying to clean up Gotham. And
no, he's the DA. No. He doesn't want to be commissioner.
He's the DA.
Sorry, the DA. Okay, forgive me. DA. So he wants to fight crime. He wants to put all these criminals away. He wants to clean up Gotham City. And Joker kills the woman that he loves, and so he goes mad. And while Batman's saving him, saving Commissioner Gordon and his family, Harvey Dent ends up dead. But he decides to take the blame for Harvey Dent's death so that Gotham City can have a White Knight hero for their city.
Mm-hmm. A martyr.
A martyr. Cut to 8 years later, and we've got this completely corrupt system putting prisoners away. That and this has led to the point of there's basically no crime in Gotham City at all right now because of this image of this guy.
Batman doesn't just take the blame for Harvey Dent's death in The Dark Knight. He takes the blame for other things that Harvey did, other murders that he did. He says to Gordon, I did it. I killed those people. Call it in. And so Batman has taken on all of Harvey Dent's sins. And this was actually an interesting argument I had with somebody, because I really think that The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises should be at first thematically judged independently before trying to merge them together, because there's a definite set of things that happen in The Dark Knight, and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, so what it is Batman's taken on all of these things, and people's vision of Batman has changed. Batman is no longer, a vigilante who's helping us out. Public opinion had already sort of turned against Batman in The Dark Knight to begin with. Ours didn't, but the public was already against Batman. They held him responsible for what the Joker was doing because he wouldn't take his mask off, and so Batman's already become the bad guy to them. He's lived long enough to see himself become the villain. What they've done, and to your point, I think maybe they could have fleshed this out a little bit better, is I think it's very clear that the Dent Act is something that people shouldn't be comfortable with. That they have used the emotional aspect of Harvey Dent's secular sainthood, if you will, to push through a bill that gives them too much power and too much
to put mafia guys away.
Right. But they're doing it for the right purposes, so it's okay. And that's what Bane winds up appealing to, is without due process, there is no justice. Without, it's sort of the same argument that exists about, things like the NDAA or the Patriot Act here in America, right? I mean, people don't even talk about the NDAA, which is insane, which it's even worse than the Patriot Act. But those are the sorts of things where it's like the politicians use a highly emotional situation to greatly expand their power for quote unquote the right reasons. And Harvey Dent becomes the lever by which they do that in The Dark Knight Rises. And that's why it's, the symbol of badness and corruption and lies.
And it's very common that when a person, especially a DA or a commissioner or, or a high level cop, is that when they're found out to be dirty, all of the cases that they have prosecuted or been involved in come into question. And so even though Harvey Dent is dead and it's his symbol that has put all of these people away, the same rules apply, where if he was found out to be a false idol,
right,
then everybody would have to review the Dent Act, saying like, oh my God, we put this Dent Act in on a false idol. Did we do something wrong? Was this stupid? Do these guys really deserve to be behind jail? So like, even though like from an outsider's perspective, it's just like, wait, the mafia is down. What does it matter if Harvey Dent was Two-Face or not? The end result is good. There's less crime.
Right.
But that's where the whole question comes into play.
And it even plays back into the exchange that the mayor has with Dent when he has Gordon and the commissioner go out of the office, and he says to Dent, you'd better stay clean, because if they find one dirty thing on you, it's all over. All of this collapses, and they're going to come for you. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Right. I
because
know
it's
what you're saying, yep.
Yeah, because it's the scene where he says all of that and he looks out the window, and then suddenly the Batman impersonator's body slams into the window, kicking off the next series of Joker hijinks. But
okay, so it sounds to me like I did understand what's going on. I thought that it didn't make sense in the movie, but it's just, no, this act just does not make any sense. And what's going on with elevating Harvey Dent just doesn't make much sense. It ended up being corrupt in the end, right? And so it's not a good thing.
It's one of those philosophical things that I enjoy about this movie, the whole question, or even that I liked about, Captain America Civil War. Like, you can use people's fear to manipulate the system and turn it into, get away with all sorts of crazy things, so long as people are sold on an idea emotionally to the point where they don't think critically about it, and that's what the Dent Act is this is for your own good. Don't look too closely. Hey, remember Harvey Dent? He'd want this. Oh, okay.
And that's why we have this great kind of bookend at the end where Commissioner Gordon is sitting down at the unveiling of the Batman statue. He's not smiling.
Right.
He's not looking happy. He's just like, oh crap. Like, even though, he wanted people to know that the Batman saved them, he's like, do we have another Harvey Dent on our hands? What are we going to do after this? And I thought that was very interesting. Now, before we're going on a while here, because there's so much to talk about this film. Like, one great thing about this movie is that it's so dense and filled with such great stuff. And one of the criticisms is it's so dense and it's filled with stuff that's too complicated for its own good. But one thing that I do want to talk about is the cinematography. Mm-hmm. This is Wally Pfister's last film as a director of photography, and this is beautiful. I think this is probably Nolan's best shot film, in my opinion. I think this is so great with the symbolism, the themes that are the visual themes that are laid across by Pfister. And one thing that I do want to talk about is a friend of mine actually got to have a conversation with Pfister about this movie, and he asked him, like, what was your most difficult thing with filming this movie? And he said, he's like, Nolan wanted this to take place in the winter, mm-hmm. but yet we shot it in the summer. And Nolan did not understand. This is Pfister talking. Nolan did not understand that the sun is different in the summer than it is in the winter. And so if you watch the Dark Knight Rises and look for winter sun, you will see it. And especially in that final battle at the courthouse steps, like, it is, you see long and harsh shadows. Pfister brought in gigantic sun lamps in order to not fight the sun, but go with the sun and enhance it. There's a saying in cinematography that you can't fight the sun. You can't compete with the sun. And Pfister knows this. And so he tried to enhance the sun to make it look like winter. And this is the best example of showcasing a different season than what you're actually shooting in. And also just like shot over an hour in IMAX footage. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. And Pfister and Nolan wanted to shoot the entire thing in IMAX footage. They wanted to shoot the entire movie, but the camera was just way too loud for dialogue scenes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably one of my favorite things as we bow out, or as we start to close. I want to hear your What's one thing that you take away from this film? You're just like, yeah, that's great. Now, John, you already said Bane, so I'm going to give you a second to think about something else. Brandon, what's one of your favorite things about this film that you're just like, when you think about it, you're like, that's it. That's what represents The Dark Knight Rises to me.
As you just said, I think that they should have filmed the entire movie in IMAX, because watching it on my home video release, I believe that the IMAX looked better in this movie than it did in Dark Knight. And it was a significant difference in image quality between the IMAX sequences and the non-IMAX sequences, from what I could see on my disc. And, I still found the transition between size of image rather distracting. I think they should have definitely filmed this all in IMAX. But it is a really beautiful movie. I think that's really interesting, that information that you gave. I didn't know that about it. But the one thing that really kind of blew me away when I was watching the bonus features on the making of the film was just how they did the bat sequence with the bat. Was pretty amazing. The fact that they combined models, like a giant model on rope, a giant model that was kind of like also on some crane arm of a vehicle that was driving around, and how they were able to eliminate that from the screen, as well as having something hanging from a helicopter that they were flying around and whatnot. I think that was a pretty stellar sequence, and probably the thing that I take away the most from this. I really love that new toy of Batman's, and I thought it was a lot of fun.
John.
I know how cheesy this is going to sound, especially because there is actually a criticism I have of the exact same moment. But I think that the ending of this is probably what always makes it soar for me, specifically because I am so used to the sentiment, especially having grown up in the 80s and 90s, of filmmakers feeling obligated to give you something of a downer at the end of this sort of thing. That sort of obligation that, to go back to like Lawrence Kasdan in the story conferences for Return of the Jedi, we should kill Lando, increase the stakes. And Lucas being like, no, we don't kill Lando. No. I want happy at the end of this. The fact that they had Bruce Wayne get away made me so happy, and still makes me happy when I see it, because I still feel like it's a reward. It's saying it doesn't have to be a downer. It's okay. The hero can win sometimes, and just win outright. And I like that as much as, and this is getting back to the criticism I would make, if I were in the editing bay arguing, and I never will be, but if I were arguing that moment with Mr. Nolan, I'd have cut out the shot of Bruce and Selina and just had Alfred look up and have the drum beat, and have Alfred smile and leave the question for the audience. Did he see them? Did he think he saw it? Like that sort of, I think that would have been a more fun ending. But I remember going all the way back to the first showing, feeling so happy seeing Bruce. I just at the end of these three movies, seeing everything the character has gone through, and to think, you know what, he did go off and he had his happily ever after, makes me happy. I like it. I'm glad that he chose to do that.
That's really interesting, because I always interpreted that was Alfred's dream at the end, because like for him to actually show up randomly at that same time when Alfred was there, at that same place where Alfred always went, I'm like, no, that's Alfred's dream at the end of this. So I've always interpreted that Batman died and Bruce Wayne died at the end of this movie.
I'm so glad that both of you brought that up, because that was a lot, that moment was interpreted that way, like in a binary way by a lot of fans, because I feel like it's kind of a Nolan syndrome where it's just like, what's the twist? Like, no, there's got to be ambiguity and everything like that. So just like Michael Caine did with Inception, he did with this movie, where he talked with an interviewer and they said like, hey, was the ending ambiguous? Was it a dream? He's like, no, it was real. It's like, it was real. That's how it was written. And he ran off with the cat lady forever and happy. And I couldn't be happier for them. Like it was like, that's how it is. I mean, like, of course, if you ask Nolan, he'd say, oh, like, sure. Like, what do you think? It's up to interpretation. But like, no, like that's how Nolan wrote it. That's how it was communicated to the actors in the script. And it was communicated verbally to the actors, not written down, so that it wasn't leaked out. And also another thing that they did was at the cemetery scene, Bruce Wayne's name was not on the headstone. It actually said Miranda Tate while they were filming, and they just digitally altered it. And actually, Christian Bale was there in a suit while they were filming because they knew paparazzi was going to be there.
That's just, it's crazy the lengths you have to go to stop the spoilers nowadays. That's just nuts.
It's absolutely insane. Like there's this movie has so many stories like that. Brandon, where did you see Nolan? Where did you first see Nolan in this film?
The plane sequence right at the beginning. I mean, it's just that it's reminiscent of Insomnia right off the bat. So.
Yeah.
Yep. Same thing.
John, same answer?
Exact same thing.
Yeah.
It starts off and you're like, yep, Christopher Nolan movie.
Even though I have given this film a lot of criticism, even though I have said that there's things that just outright don't make sense and don't make me mad, well, they don't make me mad anymore, but I still don't think they make sense. They're still, and we haven't even talked about Blake figuring out that Bruce Wayne was Batman. I don't even want to touch on that. Even though, like, people are going to mock me for the score that I'm going to give it, because I've hit so hard on this, because like I have mocked other individuals who have ripped movies apart and said, yeah, 4 stars, but I'm going to do that right now, because when I first saw it as 2.5, I was just like, oh man, there's so much wrong with this, but I've learned to love it and see beyond it. And I echo what John says about how things that are so good in this movie make up for the things that don't make sense or that are not as good. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I give this 4 stars. Like I give Batman Begins 4.5, Dark Knight 5, and Dark Knight Rises 4. Brandon, what about you?
I like this movie a lot more this time. Honestly, the first time I saw it, I probably would have given it a 1. Like, I just legit outright hated this movie the first time I saw it. Seeing it a second time this past weekend here, I enjoyed it. And if I was given halves, I'd probably give it 3.5. But with my whole star rating, I can't give it a 3, so I got to give it a 4. It's good. Wow. I mean, I enjoy it a lot. I mean, it's the same kind of thing where there's a lot of really good stuff in this movie. And there's a lot of things to nitpick, but on the whole, it's still a pretty fun ride.
John?
4.5.
4.5.
4.5. And it gets the extra half just because the ending is so emotionally, I connect with it so much, and I connect with the climb out of the pit so much. And it resonated with me for a couple of different personal reasons and stuff like that. So it gets a little extra love from me. 4.5.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for discussing this film. And also thank you for listening. Thank you so much for subscribing and going to thenerdparty.com for all of your nerd needs. Please go to that website because we have so many shows for you guys. We have Star Trek shows, Star Wars shows. We have Doctor Who, Babylon 5, Harry Potter, something for everyone. And we got new content coming at you every single day of the week. And check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're there. Just search The Nerd Party and you'll find us. Brandon, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Matella. Over on the United Federation of Podcast Network, I have 2 shows called Infinite Diversity, which is all about new Star Trek, and a show called Franchise Fatigue, which is all about movies, remakes, and sequels. And perhaps someday we'll get to the Dark Knight trilogy over on that show. You can also find me on Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast with my friends Chris and Tom, where we cover all of Hitch's films in chronological order.
And you can find me as Kessel Junkie online, KESSELJUNKIE on your social network of choice. I encourage you to look for me over on Letterboxd instead of any of the other ones because let's be honest, let's have a little more fun in this life. And here on the network, you can find me co-hosting a Star Wars podcast of a different stripe with Matthew Rushing called Aggressive Negotiations, where we do not talk about breaking news or set leaks or anything like that. We talk about the deep philosophical stuff that goes on in the Star Wars galaxy, and we've got a lot to talk about with The Mandalorian lately. So check us out over on Aggressive Negotiations.
You can find me, the Insane Robin, on Twitter as well as Letterboxd, and I have a few archive shows at thenerdparty.com, like Punch It Writing and Star Trek, or Nerd Nuptial, a show that I hosted with my wife. And again, thank you so much for listening. Please remember to subscribe, tell your friends about this show, and next week we're going to be talking Interstellar. John, have we started the fire?
Yes, the fire rises.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.